Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Coimbra, and I'm a product manager on the Google Assistant.
I'm Sachit Mishra. I'm on the Google Assistant Developer Relations team.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Hirschhorn from our Product Partnerships team. I work on early-stage integrations with lots of our developers.
Cool. So welcome to the Introduction to Building Actions for the Google Assistant. This is our overview session. So if you're totally new to all this, hopefully it'll pique your interest in the other great deep dive sessions we have at I/O this year. So I'll be going through the why you should build, so the motivation and background for building for the Assistant. And then we'll hear my favorite part from Sachit, how to build, the deep dive into the tech. And finally, Jamie will explain how to really flourish with the platform and optimize your actions to get more value. So it seems like we see a major shift in technology every decade or so. Mainframes, or so I'm told, the desktops, the web, mobile. For example, with the move from web to mobile, we saw an explosion of new devices, new ways to consume content, interact with services via apps in the mobile web. So with each shift, computing becomes more ubiquitous, and people expect technology to do more and more to help them with their day-to-day lives. But all these devices and services also increase complexity, and they can get in the way, creating confusion when we're just trying to get things done. We hope that it'll solve, so that's why we're so excited about the Assistant, because we hope that it can solve some of these problems by orchestrating across this ocean of services and devices at our disposal, and allow us to just naturally express what we want, literally say it out loud, and get back what we asked for in an equally natural way. So the Google Assistant is our approach to this new era of digital assistance and conversational computing. And we're starting to see that long-term vision come to fruition. Users are asking for things in new ways. They're saying, I want to know, I want to do, I want to hear. And they're expecting to be able to complete more and more complex tasks with assistance. And they're asking for their favorite brands to be available in this new modality across all their devices. So a great example that you probably saw this morning is Starbucks. Soon, you'll be able to ask Starbucks for your usual, and in minutes, have your drink waiting for you at the closest location. So this is a service that many of us use on a daily basis, and we're bringing an entirely new level of convenience and seamlessness to this use case. So how do we do this? Well, Actions on Google is the developer platform for the Google Assistant. Now, if you're already participating in Google's existing ecosystems like Search, Android, Play, Maps, well, we're working to automatically bring your services and content to the Assistant. But Actions on Google is the way to target the Assistant directly. So let's say you already have a web app or a mobile app, you've optimized every pixel of it, and you're asking what's next? Bring it to the Assistant. But don't go rewrite your whole app. Think about the use cases that make sense in this space. For example, Starbucks focused on the daily routine of ordering your usual coffee on the way to work. So we want Actions on Google to be this powerful new ecosystem for developers to participate in this new assistant space and leverage Google's investments in AI-first technology. But for you to invest, we expect you to ask us, what do I get in return? And there's three things that I think are really important for us to provide for this to be a valuable platform. Those are reach, monetization, and re-engagement. First of all, we have to provide you with reach, which is access to a wide audience of users. Now, users are already coming to the Assistant to perform over 1 million actions. But the ecosystem is far from saturated. As users come to get more and more things done, there's a huge opportunity for your brand to get discovered and fulfill unmet needs. And they're performing these actions across a huge range of devices and contexts, from voice-enabled speakers like the Google Home, to phones, to Android Auto, to TVs, Chromebooks, and more. Bringing the number of devices where you can reach users to over 500 million. Another component to the audience expansion is the global user base. Actions are now available in 25+ locales, with more coming this year. So once you have access to this wide audience, you need to be able to actually run your business, make money. So last year, we added transactional capabilities for physical goods and services, and soon we're expanding this to digital goods and subscriptions as well. Now, we've built out an end-to-end transactional experience completely native to the conversational modality. Using Google Pay, we can seamlessly take payments from users, and with Google Identity, we can sign them into your app and even register for new accounts. And now, these experiences are going to be even more seamless, with fully eyes-free support for both payments and identity. So we have a great session on Thursday, actually, on adding transactional capabilities, if you'd like to learn more. Now, the final key to making this successful is to create a sustainable platform. And this re-engagement is all about creating a loyal base of users that keep coming back to your action over and over again. Now, I'm a product manager on the Assistant, and I can tell you that our team constantly thinks about what we call user journeys. And we've analyzed tons of usage behavior and found 3 critical journeys where we think we can really assist users. In the morning, when they're trying to get out the door, during their commute so they can be productive on the go, and in the evening when they're trying to de-stress and relax. So in these key moments, users are highly engaged and they keep coming back to the assistant. And by optimizing for these moments, the assistant can drive organic discovery and retention to your actions. So if you'd like to learn more about driving engagement, come to Thursday's session on building a user base for your actions. So we really do believe there's an amazing opportunity here for you to get a wide audience, make money, and then get more loyalty and retention. But what should you actually build to get in on this? Well, we offer a range of integrations. And the first one is vertical programs. So these are direct integrations with Google, and they're great because with a simple API implementation, Google creates an entire user experience for you. Now, it's been amazing to see the success and adoption of our smart home API, which you heard it now integrates with over 5,000 devices. A single API ties together the Google Assistant and the device maker's infrastructure, which lets Google to understand increasingly complex commands and support a wide range of understanding. So we have a great talk on smart home integrations on Thursday, so please visit to find out more. And this is just one example of how powerful vertical programs are by enabling great user experiences with simple integrations. Now, for publishers, we offer content actions. This extends our long history of structured data markup with Google Search. You can optimize your structured data for the assistant to enable great voice experiences with your content. So for example, a user might ask the assistant about recipes and see a rich set of results from Food Network. Because the content is optimized for the assistant, we can provide voice instructions and guide them through the recipe step by step. If you're already doing structured data for search, you're on the right track. And we have a deep dive Wednesday on taking the next step to actually optimize that for the assistant. Next, with app actions, we're helping users discover the core capabilities of your existing Android app. So you can expose actions and content from your Android app by linking it to semantic intents in the actions.xml file. This allows Google to map user queries and for content and actions to your app, and then feature you in suggestions across the Android launcher, Smart Text Selection, Google Search app, and Google Assistant on Android, and the Play Store. So you see, app actions will allow your app to get further reach and engagement with our users. And you can find all about this actually just today at 5 p.m. in the talk Getting Started with App Actions. So these are great ways to integrate if you have an existing Android app or a vertical or content-specific use case. But many of the most successful ecosystems, like the web and mobile, are powerful because they have a generalized integration model that allows developers to build custom experiences for any use case they can imagine. For the assistant, this model is called Conversational Actions. These are immersive conversational experiences completely custom for your brand. They're a direct conversation between you and your user. So here's a cool example of a conversational action. It's called California Surf Report, and it helps you find wave conditions if you live in California. Let's walk through the user experience. So a user says a query like, talk to California Surf Report, and this is like the voice version of a shortcut on the mobile home screen. So the Google Assistant is then able to look through its index of actions and finds a match. So now it's time to let the user know that it's going to hand over control to California Surf Report. So it says something like, sure, connecting you with that action. The user hears an earcon, which is like an audio version of an icon. It's a distinctive sound, letting the user know a transition is taking place. And now the user is conversing directly with the action. The action welcomes the user in its own voice, explaining its functionality and asking an initial question. And finally, the action is able to respond with the information the user asked for and ends the conversation. We hear another earcon, letting the user know the assistant is back in control of the conversation. So this is a powerful, open-ended model where you can build any sort of conversational interaction that you can imagine. And it's not just about voice. So Assistant is on so many different devices, and many of them have screens. Now, adding rich visuals to supplement a conversational interface makes it far more engaging and delightful for your users. Here are some examples of that same interaction with California Surf Report on visual devices. As you can see, it creates an immersive experience, responding to the user with rich visuals as well as visual output, as well as voice output, sorry. Now, supporting different modalities and form factors has always been a challenge for platforms like the web and mobile. And when you build for the Assistant, you're targeting an even more diverse range of modalities, from voice-only, like Google Home, to voice-forward devices like the new smart displays, intermodal devices like the phone, and visual-only, like smartwatches. But our conversational action APIs are multimodal. With a single implementation of our rich response API, Google is able to scale your experience across all these devices. If you're interested in learning more about this, we have a great session on Wednesday called Design Actions for the Assistant. Of course, no matter how smart these APIs are, it still takes some work and technical know-how to get up and running. And that's why we provide templates to get you started. This is a super fun and easy way to build for the Assistant. No programming knowledge required. You can create fun and engaging conversational actions like personality quiz, trivia, and flashcards. All you have to do is come to the Actions console and follow a step-by-step wizard to get started with the template. Then you just fill out a Google Sheets spreadsheet with the content. For example, for flashcard, there's a row for each card and columns for the two sides and a hint. So I'd love for everyone here to tonight go and spend 20, 30 minutes and build a conversational action with templates. You'll see it's really fun and easy. Of course, I know most of you are developers, so that's never going to be satisfying enough. You probably have a use case we've never thought of, or you want to create something truly custom, or you're just interested in this conversational space and want to start building your skills. So let's hear a little bit about how to build custom conversational actions.
All right. Hey, everyone. So Adam's just laid out a bunch of options for integrating with the Google Assistant. And what I want to do is I want to walk us through building a conversational action. And to do that, I want to share a journey with you of how I got to here, a fully functional, high-quality conversational action that I built from scratch. And what it does is it gives the user some information about any given programming language, specifically information that will inform whether to use that language in an upcoming project. So, like many of my colleagues at Google, and I'm sure many of you here, I have had the profound gift of sharing my programming knowledge with others. Back when I was in high school in South Florida, I volunteered at a youth program in my community where we taught the basics of programming to middle school and high school students. And this was in a community where a lot of these students wouldn't have had exposure to this knowledge without these kinds of classes. And after high school, when I moved away for college, I had to say goodbye to these students with whom I had worked for so long. And I've always been looking for another way to reach out to them. But lucky for me, a lot of them have grown up, and they now have Android phones and other devices with the Google Assistant built in. So I thought that the Assistant would be a great platform to reach out to them once again with an old lesson about choosing the right language for the right project. So from all of the options that Adam had laid out, I had to figure out which one was the best for me. So I needed to build something that was educational, but I kind of have my own brand, my own way of teaching, and I want to own that back and forth. I want to control the dialogue. So I needed conversation. So I went to the Actions on Google documentation, and I learned more about building conversations. And I learned that it basically works by sending your endpoint a request for every turn of dialogue, and it gives you complete control over the conversation. You get your own voice separate from the Google Assistant, and the conversation ends when you decide, or when the user cancels out. But that's pretty daunting, especially for someone who has historically built graphical applications, right? So I wanted to learn more. So when it comes to any new platform, there are 4 things I care about: design, tools, infrastructure, and testing. So with this whole new paradigm of interacting with the user, I wanted to start with design. So I learned that one big thing to consider is your actions persona. Human beings, we have this remarkable habit of comparing any human-like interaction to a real human presence. And I promise that this is going to happen to your action. So find a persona for your action and always ask, what would this persona say or do in this moment? And how did I come up with my persona? Well, first I came up with some adjectives that describe my brand, right? So I'm a little bit geeky, and I'm overeager, and I'm kind of talkative when the topic is something that I really care about. And then I came up with some characters that embody this in the real life. So I could use an engineer like myself, or maybe like a librarian, or if you're like any of my friends, video game enthusiasts, they tend to be this way as well. And then I chose one, and I kind of willed it down to a description. So I came up with like a digital librarian program that's been migrated from legacy architecture to architecture since the 70s, and so it knows a lot about programming languages. All right, so then I had another choice to make. I had to choose a voice. Right? And I realized I had a couple options here. Okay, so the platform comes with some built-in synthesized voices, both female and male, and that makes it really easy to just plug in your text and go. And you can even get some advanced control over the delivery of that output, which speech synthesis markup language. And that allows you to control some things like the pitch and the speed, and insert little breaks, and even embed audio clips in the output. The other option is I could go with recorded voice talent, and I could use that instead. And this has the potential to take my experience to the next level, but I would actually have to go find some voice talent help, and I would have to localize my recordings if I wanted to be supported in more regions. So I just didn't have the resources for that. That wasn't going to work for me. All right, so now I figured out a couple design principles to guide me, and I can jump into the tools. The first place I went is the Actions console. And here I created a project, and I can see all these options for getting started. I can see the different categories of actions that I can build. I can simulate my action when it's in development. I can check out analytics on the action when it's published. I can edit the directory listing that users are going to see in the assistant directory. And the beautiful thing about this project is that it's actually backed by the Google Cloud and by Firebase. So all of my related technical assets can live in one place. All right, cool. So I can create a project, and I can create an endpoint in, let's say, Firebase using the same project. But this endpoint is going to receive the text of the user's utterance, and I need to process that. Okay, but I don't have a PhD in natural language processing, and my machine learning is shaky at best. All right, so what do? I'm going to use regular expressions. So the next thing I figured out is that Google is going to give me this amazing tool for natural language understanding called Dialogflow. And it does exactly what I need. It turns that unstructured natural language input into a structured representation that my endpoint can consume. Dialogflow sits in the middle between the assistant and my server, and it does that for me with hybrid machine learning-powered intent matching and entity recognition. All right, so we'll dive into those in a second, but first, I just wanted to build one turn of dialogue. So I dug more deeply, and I figured out how to at least build this. And so the way this was going to work is that the user is going to invoke my action by name using one of our supported phrases like talk to, and then the magical Google Assistant infrastructure is going to handle that like it would any other user utterance, but it's going to realize that my action is the best to handle it. So my Dialogflow agent is going to receive a request, and it's going to realize it's being invoked. So it's going to trigger something called a welcome intent, and this is a default that every Dialogflow agent comes with. All right, so how do I do this? From the Actions console in the project overview page, I can create a custom action through Dialogflow. And in Dialogflow, I'm going to modify the welcome intent, and I'm going to remove the default greetings that it gives me. All right, so now I need to come up with some sort of greeting for the user. And I'm thinking about it, and I can't really come up with anything captivating. And then I remembered, what would my persona say in this moment? And so with that, I came up with a couple kind of geeky and over-eager variations of welcome prompts, which ask the user for a language. Something like, hi there, I can tell you all about programming languages. Which one do you want to hear about? So I'm greeting the user, I'm orienting them to what my action can do, and then I'm prompting them. And so from there, I can head over to the Actions console through the Dialogflow integrations page, and I can start messing with my action. And if I wanted to in the future, I could do some really cool stuff here. So I could taper the greeting for repeat users, or I could change it based on how long it's been since that specific user has last spoken to my action. And by the way, there's a session at 10:30 a.m. on day 3 about personalizing actions for users. So if you're interested, check that one out. But anyway, I've got a dialogue started now. All right, so that was easy enough. Okay, but now the user is going to respond. And there's a million ways that they could answer that question of which language they want to learn about, right? So how do I account for all this variation? I'm going to use a Dialogflow intent. All right, so the way Dialogflow intents work is that you train them to listen for phrases that the user is going to speak in each turn of dialogue. And then each semantically similar set of phrases is called an intent, right? So with the power of machine learning, when the user says anything similar to the phrases you've provided, at any point in the conversation, Dialogflow is going to match that intent. So I created an intent which listened for the user saying something like, tell me about Kotlin, or should I use JavaScript? And then Dialogflow knows that they're basically asking about a language, and it extracts from that which language they want. Now, how does it do that? Well, I had defined a custom entity in Dialogflow called languages, which lists out all of the programming languages that I support. And how am I going to account for the variation in the way each programming language is spoken? Programming languages have nicknames. Well, Dialogflow offers the feature of designating synonyms for each canonical value. And Dialogflow also comes with a bunch of built-in system entities that it already knows about, things like temperature and cities and dates and times. All right, so now at this point, I need to actually dynamically respond to the user with some information about the language that they've chosen. So I'm going to need to expand my infrastructure a little bit. OK, so we've got the interaction that I've already built, that one turn of dialogue. But now the user is going to respond with a request to know about some specific language. Like, let's say they say, tell me about Kotlin. And this time, the Google Assistant is going to hand off directly to my action because the user's already entered the dialogue. And it's going to handle the speech-to-text transcription, and Dialogflow is going to match the which language intent that I described earlier. But this time, instead of responding, it's going to reach out to my webhook hosted on Cloud Functions for Firebase, and it's going to dynamically pull information about that language and present it to the user. So how did I tell Dialogflow to do that? Well, I set the URL of my cloud function in the fulfillment settings of Dialogflow. And here, I can edit some auth and header settings for the post request that my webhook receives. And there's also an inline editor in this page, so you can actually edit your cloud functions code right in the Dialogflow console. All right, let's talk a little bit more about building one of these webhooks. So since I'm using cloud functions for Firebase, I'm going to be using Node.js. And the first thing I'm going to do in my index.js file is I'm going to create a simple JSON mapping of language strings to some helpful fact about that language. And then later in the same file, I'm going to use the Actions on Google Node.js client library to handle the which language intent from Dialogflow with a callback. And so in that callback, I'm actually going to respond with some fact from that mapping that I had defined earlier, and I'm going to prompt the user to ask about another language. So I'm furthering the conversation. And at this point, I've got something pretty substantial to test. So I can go back to that simulator in the Actions console, and I can play around more with it like a natural user. And at this point, I might actually use some of the debugging information on the right side, and I can actually simulate the experience as if I was a user on different surface types. All right, so speaking of surfaces, the experience right now is a little bit dry on a screen device. So how can I change that? Well, one thing I can do is I can add more visual descriptions of the information. So here, I'm using a basic card class from the Node.js library to construct a rich visual response for the Go programming language. And it has a couple cool things. It has some title, and it has some text, and even some imagery and alternative text for accessibility. In this case, the image is Go's mascot. And then I've even got a button with a link to Go's website. And notice how the API gives me really granular control over the construction of the response, even the placement of the chat bubbles above and below the basic card. So let's say I needed to guide the user a bit more, like they didn't know which language they could choose from. So I can create a list of programming languages that I support. And in the library, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mapping of each language to a row in the list with its own title and image. And then I'm going to present the options to the user as a list, and the user can tap or say whichever they choose. But what if I want to emphasize the graphics? I can change one word in the code, list becomes carousel, and the user can now swipe through and browse the options more visually. But this is all on a screen device, right? Like, what if the user's on a smart speaker and I want to show them something visual? Well, here's a super cool feature. And it's one that empowers you as developers to leverage the immersiveness of the assistant. I can check if the user is on a screen device currently, and if not, whether they have any screen devices with the assistant linked to their account. And if they do, I can actually ask them to switch devices. So the dialogue is going to end on their speaker, and they're going to get a notification on the phone where they can resume the dialogue. And I even get control over what the notification says. So this is a great example of how we're really unlocking the power of the assistant for all of you. And there's a session tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. About designing across surfaces, so check that one out. And then let's say I had a mobile app, and it includes some authentication. I can actually plug into that from my action so that the user's identity is shared across mobile app and action. And there's a session on day 3 at 9:30 a.m. about integrating mobile apps with the assistant. All right, so now I've got a pretty cool experience going, but I kind of want to test it further, right? So we've already talked about testing it in the Actions console simulator, where I can get debug information and I can try my action on different surfaces. But while I can test in the console, I can also test directly on any assistant-enabled device which is logged into the same Google account. And we're also announcing something really cool that you've asked for a long time. You can create alpha and beta versions of your actions that can be shared with a limited audience for feedback and iteration. So this means with my action, I could share it with some of my students before publishing live. And there's a session with more about testing tomorrow at 8:30 in the morning, so check that out. But now you've built this high-quality action, you've got some rich responsiveness, and you've got variation, and you've shared it with some users, and you've iterated on the feedback, so you're ready to submit to our review team and push the action live. So let's hear more about that.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie again. So now that you've heard a lot about the how and what to build on the assistant, let's talk about how you can actually be successful on the platform. So we think of this in 3 key pillars: discovery, monetization, and re-engagement. As you heard from Adam, people are turning to their devices and their assistants for lots of different things in their day. It can be small, something like setting a timer, or it can be a little bit more meaningful, like helping plan your day. So whether you're building a productivity action, a food ordering action, a gaming action, whatever it might be, we know that your users are out there looking for you. So I know everyone's had a long day today. It's a little bit hot out. Let's do a really quick exercise. Everyone close your eyes for a second. Think about the best party that you've ever been to. Maybe it was in college, maybe it was last night, maybe it was a wedding or a family affair. Maybe you remember the smells, the food, the music. Now, imagine you were never invited to that party. So think about your favorite brands, for example. Did you take a ride-sharing service here this morning? Did you order from a food delivery service last night? Do you have a favorite game or a retailer? Now imagine that nobody ever told you about those brands or experiences either. This is why discovery is so important, and inviting someone to your experience is oftentimes just as critical as building a great experience yourself. So where do you get started? The best place to start is with our assistant directory. It lives on both web and mobile across Android and iOS. And as a developer, once you start a project in our AOG console, you'll be able to optimize this listing in real time. What's really interesting here is that we see 30% of third-party actions get discovered here in this directory. So it's really critical to optimize this first entry point. Let's talk about a variety of use cases here in the directory. It starts with browsing. So here you'll see timely and personal recommendations towards the top, and less contextual content as you scroll down the page. There's a few areas to highlight here. First, you'll see contextual suggestions. These are relevant suggestions based on the user's context, things like time of day, location. And for example, here I can see a recommendation for my morning, like playing my favorite playlist. Next, you'll see dynamic categories. You'll see a total of 4 of them that are live today. What's new, which highlights new quality actions. What's popular, which highlights overall popular actions. What's trending, which is recently popular actions. And lastly, which is the most tailored, what you might like, which is actions based on the user's history. The second use case that you'll see that the directory supports is categorical browsing and search. Here we're trying to really help our users find relevant actions in specific categories and find their actions that are their favorite actions through a really quick search. So let's say, for example, I'm interested in food and drink as a category. You'll see all of the relevant actions here in that category, but you'll also see some helpful subcategories. So for example, you can see that you have the option to order food from perhaps Domino's or from Dunkin' Donuts, but I can also get recipes from Food Network. Finally, and most importantly, your action page. Think of this as the welcome mat to your brand, to your action. It should reflect your brand, and it should invite users to really try your action. You'll see at the top here, there's a quick summary, which you'll see imagery, a description, and sample invocation queries. This allows the user to really understand what your app does. The second section you'll see, ratings and recently launched reviews. This allows the user to assess the quality of your action before perhaps trying it. So what does this all mean for you? How can you actually optimize this in real time? How do you make your actions stand out within over 1 million actions in our directory today? Here's a live example I'll walk you through. Pretend I'm a French bulldog lover, and I wanted to publish an action on French bulldog trivia. On the left here, you'll see that we did a few things really, really well. You'll see short, concise names, strong, clear images, accurate descriptions, whereas you'll see on the right, it gets trimmed off a bit, and most importantly, a bunch of sample invocations. So we maximize the number of queries that a user understands that they can actually use to invoke this app. Instead of just saying, talk to French bulldog trivia, you'll see a variety of invocations, such as ask French bulldog trivia about grooming, for example. OK, so now you've built your app. You're live with a directory listing. Let's talk about how built-in intents can also help you get discovered. It's a great tool. The reason we built this was because we saw 3 trends. Firstly, it's really hard for users to find an action for something that they want to do. Secondly, it's hard for Google to actually classify what an app can do on our end. And thirdly, natural language understanding is pretty hard. So as you can see here, there are a ton of languages, there are dialects, there are cultural differences, there's slang that all make a million different ways to say the exact same thing. So look at this small set of ways that a user can simply express to say, I want to de-stress. Built-in intents can provide a common taxonomy for actions across all of our Google surfaces. So in this scenario, for example, you'll see if somebody says, hey, Google, I want to start meditating, we can then suggest a few different actions that we know will service that need and are actually indeed meditation apps. So here are some of the built-in intents that we're working on this year. You'll see the ones that are starred will be soon in developer preview, so I really, really encourage everyone to check this out in Dialogflow and see which ones really make the most sense for your business. Keep in mind, we'll be rolling lots more out this year, which is really exciting. The best part about built-in intents and lots of these other tools that I'll talk about today are that they're really, really easy to implement. You just log into your AOG console, simply pick from a list of intents that describes your action best, and describe it. And finally, here's the output of this new infrastructure. If somebody has a very generic ask, like I want to play a maps quiz or I want to play a quiz, here you'll see a bunch of different relevant suggestions for games. So the last tool that I'll talk about today for discovery is called Action Links, which is an awesome tool to help you promote your experience. You'll see here in the Headspace example that we, Google, will actually promote these experiences in our own action link, in our own assistant directory, where a user can actually deep link directly from the app directory into your action on the device of their choice. So what's really cool about action links is that these actually can help you promote your own action to your owned and operated audiences. So everything from your social sites, like you can see a tweet here from Brad from earlier today, or your own website, like BuzzFeed, where you can actually see a user can deep link directly from their site into their action. You can promote this on apps or even a billboard, so it's not just strictly limited to digital, which is really exciting. We noticed that this actually solves two problems. One, it makes it a ton easier to deep link into an action directly. And two, once the user's had a great high-quality experience, they can now share this with their family and friends really easily themselves. So think of all the users cross-pollinating and sharing your message out there. So similar to built-in intents, Assistant Links is really, really easy to implement. You can simply generate a URL really quickly and then share across all of your channels. So now let's assume you've knocked it out of the park with discovery. We'll talk about transactions and digital goods as an awesome way for you to monetize your business and grow your experiences. So last year, we launched transactional capabilities via the Transactions API. This was limited to a phone-based experience of physical goods and worked really, really well for simple transactions. Today, you've probably heard lots of updates about transactions in a few of our sessions, but you'll see moving forward that transactions will be on more devices, expanding to more complex transactions, will enable the purchase of digital goods, and will be available more globally. When we talk about transactions on the Assistant, we're talking about three things: the ability for a user to purchase a good, hire a service, or book a reservation with their favorite brand on the Assistant. And no matter what type of transactional experience you're trying to build, the foundational elements are always the same, as you'll see here. The developer will always guide the user through the purchase process. And we have lots of APIs and other helpers to walk you through this. So I'll quickly touch on two quick announcements that were made today, which are really, really exciting, and I wanted to touch on them really quickly. So as you know, the growth of voice speakers and other assistant surfaces in your home has been huge this year, and we're really expecting it to continue to grow. You saw our continued focus on this in our developer keynote today. Users can now purchase goods and services on voice devices. This means our users can now complete transactions on surfaces like Google Home, third-party speakers, and smart screens, which was not available before. Really exciting. We've also announced that we will soon open up the ability for app developers to sell digital goods on the Assistant. This will work across both phone and voice surfaces and will be supported in multiple languages and markets, including the US, the UK, Canada, France, Australia, Germany, and Japan, to start. And we're thinking of three key use cases here as we launch this. And we're really excited about diving in deeper here and exploring these with our partners. In-app digital goods, and this is super cool for some of the gaming developers that I work with today, this is the ability to purchase gems, extra time, perhaps characters or avatars throughout your experience. It's really, really exciting. Secondly, subscription services. So think of things like streaming music or video. And lastly, digital media purchases, so things like audiobooks or rentals. So now to our final pillar. You've built up this awesome audience, you've built an awesome experience, you've acquired some users along the way. How do you continue to build loyalty and retention with this great audience? So as we've been developing the Assistant over the past few years, we've thought a lot about when, how, and where folks are actually interacting with Google. And we notice that they do this in clusters throughout their day. So perhaps in the morning, they do things like ask the Google Home about what their day might look like. As they're heading out the door, they might be using navigation. During the day, perhaps they're searching or listening to music. And then later at night, when they're winding down, perhaps they're listening to YouTube or watching YouTube or playing games, for example, or spending time with their family. So what we know here, which is really interesting, is that people are creatures of habit. So we've identified some of these clusters and where the assistant can actually provide extra value in those instances and micro moments throughout a user's day. This new feature, routines, lets users combine multiple actions into a single command. So what does that actually mean? When you wake up in the morning and you say, hey, Google, good morning, your assistant can do a few things in one simple command. It can turn your phone off silent. It can adjust your lights and thermostat. It can tell you about your day, the weather, your commute, and then it can perhaps play your favorite podcast or read you the news. As a developer, you just simply need to check off a box to enable this feature, and then users can add you to their routines. In addition to routines, I'll talk about two final re-engagement opportunities that are really exciting. So daily updates and push notifications. So daily updates are when Google can actually share a notification and pull an update at a specified time each day by the user. One example of this is you could get transportation or news alerts every single morning at the same time if Google understands that about you. So as you can see here, which is an awesome example, something that's really content fresh, is that you can also see if a user opts into something from Esquire, for example, they can receive fresh daily wisdom tips at the same time each day. Push notifications are really exciting because they can help you do things in real time. So things like getting stock alerts from your favorite news publisher. This is really exciting for me. I'm a huge nerd. It's very exciting. I love the fact that it's so real time, and it's really exciting because it provides a value to both users and developers. The value to users is that it actually helps give you access to relevant information, which is immediate, it's content rich, and it's specific to you. What's really valuable to brands and to some of you folks here as developers is that this can really help you enhance your utility as a partner to some of your users. So you can this could be a great experience if you're trying to re-engage with someone and nurture a relationship that perhaps has fallen off with a user, or if a user needs a gentle nudge to push along something that's timely. So I know it's been a long day out there, so we really appreciate everyone coming out today. If we hope that you take away a few things from today, it's one, think about your use case. What's the easiest way to get started? Templates could actually be a really great solution for you. So I encourage everyone to test this out, as Adam mentioned tonight. And it's a really great way to dip your toes in the water. Secondly, please lean in with us. Learn more with us this week. Check out some of our awesome sessions on transactions, dialog flow, learning more about your audience bases, building games. Some of our folks are here, which is really exciting. So please check those out later this week, as you can see some of the sessions listed here. And lastly, we just launched 2 new code labs. You can check them out here throughout I/O. So thank you, everyone, so much for having us. Enjoy the rest of your week.